We know precisely what that feels like. We've been down that path. We've been dealing with that journey for several years now. And for every single time that one of these school shootings or active shooter events occur anywhere in the United States, it jogs up the memories of our own tragedy. And it creates a level of fear and uncertainty in our communities. Last night, I must have received over 100 text messages and phone calls from both elected officials, pastors, school teachers, friends, and my own family about should they send their kids to school tomorrow. And the first thing we want to do is provide the assurance that yes, we expect our kids to be in the school. We as an organization, working with the school board and working with the superintendent, are very much aware of the importance of staying ahead of this and not being responsive. And over the last several years, we've done precisely that with our partnerships in our real-time crime center, what we've been able to do with our threat management unit, the partnerships and aggressive aspects that we've taken together with the school board and the superintendent to make sure we are tracking and monitoring almost 16,000+ camera systems across all of our school systems here. And so we are still ahead of this thing. We're still focusing on investigating thoroughly and having the safeguards in place to make sure we can mitigate that type of threat here. On a personal note, I want to talk about the impact that this has continued to have on myself as the chief law enforcement officer for this county, and my own frustration with where we are in society and the things that continue to occur here. So much is always placed upon the law enforcement response and what we can do to either take on these threats or to mitigate them in advance. But we also need to start focusing on putting the pressures on our elected officials. This is not our first time as a country. It's not our first journey down this dark path. And unfortunately, we all are educated enough to know this won't be our last time. And there's a continued pattern of discussion, conflict among party lines, but yet no resolution. We've had minor things of substance introduced into legislation or new laws, despite the fact that we've had over 300+ active shooter events across this country. And now we stand here again facing another horrific school shooting, if not the worst now. But how long will that title be held in Texas before it finds its way in California or even back here in Florida? And so this is something that needs to be done at a much greater level than the local municipals. We have members in Congress who have absorbed these shootings going back to Sandy Hook, and yet nothing has changed. And so I'm empowering people to pay attention to their politics, pay attention to their votes, because it matters in this capacity. It matters in this capacity. Whether it be Buffalo shooting where people are slaughtered just going to the supermarket, or now kids who probably haven't even had a chance to learn how to count to 10 are being mowed down in our society. And so this is an impassioned speech for me, something that I think needs to happen. As a recap really quickly about some of the actionable things that we're doing to help mitigate some of the concerns, Dr. Cartwright called me last night and we instantly put a plan together with our law enforcement operations to ensure that we enhance the patrol capacities in all of our districts. That includes partnerships with the Broward County Chiefs of Police, who are also doing so in the municipal cities that they're responsible for and the schools in their territories. And we will sustain that for as long as we can. That is not generated, and I'll say this again, it is not generated based on any current intelligence or threats that may be coming in. We are still in close dialogue with our partners from the FBI, Homeland Security, our own Strategic Investigations Division, and staying on top of anything that come in. Lastly, before I turn it over to Dr. Cartwright, I want to encourage the community, once again, that if you see something, say something. Forward us the information. You'll be surprised. Over the last 2 years or so, since we launched our threat management unit, we've had over 1,600+ investigations of people of interest, and much of that intelligence is coming from this community, and we want to encourage that. Out of that 1,600+ threats or so that's come into our threat management team, we've effectuated 200+ arrests. So these are positive things that we're able to get ahead and cut down some of these threats that are coming in. The last segment that I'll talk about, again, about the importance of sharing information with us is what we've been able to do when we're not able to arrest anyone. We're not just walking away anymore and saying, well, we can't arrest them, there's nothing to do. Our threat management unit has embedded behavioral licensed therapists within that unit who are deploying out into the field. And when we have contacts with individuals who pose some form of threat to themselves or others, we're directing them over into mental health care facilities or contacts with subject matter experts so that they can get the care that they need. We've done that 556 times, and out of that 556 times, about 185 times the people have continued with that type of health care. So it's telling me that they want it. We just have to give them the access to it. So with that, before we take any questions, I'll turn it over to Dr. Cartwright to talk a little bit about what's occurring in the schools and how we can further assist her. Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning. This morning I'm speaking to you in a place where I am so sad. I'm also angry that once again our country is reeling from the violent and senseless tragedy that has taken place in the school. According to other news outlets, yesterday's event was the 30th K-12 tragedy this school year alone, the 30th. I offer my deepest condolences to the families of the school children and the teachers who were killed and injured in yesterday's attack. Our hearts are broken. Our hearts are broken for that community, for the Uvalde community. And I pray for strength and unity as they pick up the pieces of this horrific event that they are now facing. To my Broward community, we are here. I want you to know that the Broward County Public Schools is committed to providing a safe environment for our children and for our staff. We have resources available. If your child is struggling, or to my staff members, if you are struggling, please reach out to us. We have mental health counselors that are ready to support you. These resources are free of charge, so please do not let that be a hindrance. Again, I urge you, if you're seeing that your child is struggling, or if you are struggling, please reach out to us so that we can provide you with support. And this is going to be free of charge to any family who has a child enrolled in Broward County Public Schools. If you need additional assistance, parents, guardians, caregivers, even if trying to recognize maybe signs and symptoms of a child who may be struggling, please visit our website at browardschools.com/family counseling. We do have resources available on our website to help you identify this. Additionally, our Office of Safety, Security, and Emergency Preparedness works tirelessly to monitor activities on our campuses and online, and we openly collaborate with law enforcement partners, just as the Sheriff's Office and Sheriff Tony. More than ever, we must remain vigilant in order to keep our children safe. This is the responsibility of everybody, even those who may not have children in our school district. If you see something, please say something. I want to reiterate what Sheriff Tony expressed, is that we do not have any current viable threats that are happening right now in Broward County Public Schools. However, we know that unfortunately this is the place where we had our own tragic murders. And as a result of that, we do have people from across the country and unfortunately across the world who will make senseless and baseless threats. My message is we will take every one of those seriously, and we will address every one of those to the fullest of our ability. I am most grateful for our partnerships with the Chiefs Association and with the Sheriff's Office. Last night, to be able to pick up the phone and just call Sheriff Tony directly, and to pick up the phone and send an email out to our Chiefs Association, and immediately the information be pushed out to all of our municipalities, speaks to the level of the relationship and collaboration that we have. And for our law enforcement partners and our first responders, I am grateful. Thank you for everything that you are doing in order to help layer our approach in order to provide the safest environment possible for our children and for our staff. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll turn it over for perhaps a few questions. I'm sure some may have. Yeah, we'll start with Ted.
In Uvalde, the shooter got into a conflict with the police going in. They weren't able to stop him. What kind of reassurances do you give families here, when you have that situation that unfolded in Texas the way it did?
Yeah, I think one of the things of interest is understanding here in Broward County, this is not, again, our first active shooter event. We can go back from the airport. We can go to what we learned even at the Shooter's Restaurant, of course, with Stoneman Douglas. And one of the things we did was advance the capabilities of our law enforcement officers in the field to be able to engage and eliminate these threats as expeditiously as possible. And so part of that was to include a procurement of over roughly $2.5 million to give all our men and women the fighting tool that they need, a rifle platform, which we know will have a high probability of penetrating some of this body armor that we're seeing consistently take place amongst one active shooter from the next, to include that of what occurred in Buffalo, because that suspect was also engaged by a retired law enforcement officer, and the rounds apparently didn't penetrate there. And so we're seeing these copycat approaches from active shooters who are now deciding that they're going to outfit themselves in heavy body armor, in some cases even helmets, and are coming in with the fighting capability of military people. Some of our special forces personnel are carrying the exact same platforms, the exact same body armor into combat zones in foreign countries. But we're having 18, 19, 20-year-old individuals who are walking into our schools now with that type of capability. So it is imperative for this community to understand that this was a case study of our own, where we said we're not going to wait for the next shooting to happen, and make sure that every single one of our law enforcement officers have every single rifle and combat readiness for them to be successful.
So they have stronger weapons that will pierce?
We will, yes, we do. Every single one of our officers now have an M4 platform system, which is comparable to the AR-15, and the necessary rounds to make sure that we're going to be successful eliminating this threat. And I'll add on to this. This is not about politics, folks. I'm sick and tired of hearing the political rhetoric and the calmness of either those in my position or similar positions. We're facing evil out here. There's a legitimate evilness that walks these streets in every part of our country. And if we're going to expect that our law enforcement officers win these battles, then we better, as administrators, make sure they have every fighting chance to be successful, not just for themselves, but perhaps for that 10-year-old kid who's counting on an officer to put that threat down. Yes.
Sheriff, you mentioned increased patrols that will be happening immediately, and that's not the result of intelligence that you've received. But what are some of the protocols in place right now to stop an armed gunman from making it onto a campus?
Yeah, some of the things we've launched over the last really 2.5 years to enhance our response. One, we talked about just a moment ago, the procurement of the necessary equipment, but we also changed a lot of tactical strategies and deployment of resources that are really the most effective at engaging this type of threat. For example, our SWAT team. We have the finest SWAT team in this state, make no doubt about it, one of the top in the United States. We have access to training from FBI HRT to members of the Department of Defense, and we execute that training consistently. They used to sit by and wait until a call came out, until something bad happened, to respond. Now, I'm a SWAT officer, all right? I've been in the field, I've kicked down doors, I've chased bad guys shooting at us. When bad things happen, on average, anywhere in this country, it takes about 30 to 45 minutes for SWAT operators to deploy. That make no sense to me. And so under Colonel Robson, we created our Titan unit, as it's referred, where we are strategically, and have been strategically, deploying our resources out there. The community, you may not see them until they jump out or until they're engaging or dealing with something. But I can tell you, changing that protocol, having these SWAT team out there has allowed us to be successful. We've had engagements out here with some real bad people, and fortunately we've been able to stop them before others was hurt. Another segment that I'll talk about is what we've done to create a tactical alert system, where now, if we face some form of threat in Parkland, we're not waiting for a call to come out to start sending resources. We deploy our resources from all neighboring areas that are BSO jurisdiction to inundate and to create a large volume of law enforcement officer response, to include any type of medical elements from our fire rescue component. So collectively with that, our investigators and our threat management unit how we're following up on threats that are coming in. I think we're on the right path to include some of the things we've been able to do with our 17th Circuit here, with our RPO program, risk protection order. We've produced over 400 risk protection orders successfully with the court systems, but we need to stay aggressive. We can't fall behind.
You said you got a lot of texts from people you knew throughout
Yeah.
the community. Should I send my child to school tomorrow? What did you tell them?
My response was yes, send them. The one thing we cannot allow, and this is not specific to Broward County, this is for anyone who happens to hear me speak today anywhere in this country or abroad. The moment we start to give into this fear, give into this threat, give into this atrocities, and allow it to change our way of life, we're losing not just the day of the incident, but we're losing every day to follow it. And so we can't yield and change our life for sake of violence. This is not the first time violence has been in America. And so my message was to carry on, trust that I'm on top of my responsibilities and my administration, and that we're doing everything that we can mitigate it. But it's heartbreaking to hear people that I've gone to college with. I'm the godfather of their kids, and they're calling me at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and it's not Sheriff, it's, hey, Greg, I'm worried, right? So it's very personal at that point. I'm sorry, Ted, I thought, yes, that's right.
You said you're frustrated. There's only been minor substantive changes since Sandy Hook. A lot of pressure on BSO. This isn't a political question.
Sure.
As a leader of this community, what kind of changes to laws would you like to see that you think would make a difference to prevent what this
Yeah, listen, I have been a proponent about putting legislation in place to reduce how many of these high-powered weapon platforms are finding its way in the streets and in the hands of people who are mentally disturbed. I've heard this narrative for years now about, well, the AR-15, it's a sport weapon, it's a match weapon, you can use it all these things. No, it is a combat-ready weapon designed to destroy. That's the premise behind how it was designed, right? And we've allowed politics to interfere with common sense. With common sense. We are not the only country, this was just stated a few days ago, we're not the only country that's dealing with mentally ill people, but we're the only one that's having high volume casualty rates of kids and our elderly population. You can't even go to the supermarket anymore without the fear of someone jumping out with a rifle and gunning you down. Where are we headed in the society? And how many more of these incidents need to take place before we put our political differences aside and stop looking at this thing as a red issue or a blue issue, but it's an American issue. And so that's where my frustration lies. I think we also need to start looking at having universal background checks and database systems where we can track these type of encounters and what's happening, who's procuring them, who's selling them, because it's not always your law-abiding citizen that's engaging in these type of events, right? We have a criminal component, we have a mental ill component, but again, I could probably sit here and if we pulled from case study to case study and look at the recommendations that had started back in 1999 in Columbine and rolled this all the way to today's doorstep, it's a repeated circle, a repeated commentary about what we need to do, and then nothing is executed.
And what's the pressure on BSO? Like, what is this like for you? It's tough for us as reporters to report this all over again. And talk to
Yeah, it is.
for you,
It's tough on the whole community, right? So I understand your point, and I appreciate your point about BSO, but we live here too, right? We don't see ourselves just as uniformed personnel. This is our community, and it's hurtful to know that despite all the thoughts and prayers, that we're going to be back here again, and I'm going to be talking about another shooting somewhere else. And I would challenge you, perhaps the next time, how many reform efforts will take place between now and the next event that we're talking about? Probably 0 to maybe 1 or 2 changes that really have no significant bearing on whether or not we're safeguarding this community the right way. And then, was it Ted? Yes.
You said there's going to be enhanced patrols. What are we going to see? We're going to see officers with guns, we're going to see more cars.
There's a hybrid approach. Some of this stuff, Ted, I don't want to get out into the global world, so to speak, about security efforts, but we will have enhanced patrol within our districts. Our Titan team, our SWAT team, and other special operations group have been deployed. It's not going to be abnormal for them, and we've done some strategic things to have them in certain site areas to just make sure we're effective to be able to respond. With that, I can't get to too much stuff.
So SWAT team's kind of like just in different areas of the county,
That's correct.
kind of waiting in case they're needed.
Yes, that's correct.
You had said earlier that typically it takes 30 to 40 minutes or so to establish a SWAT team in
Mhm.
a situation. Prior to yesterday, how long did it take to assemble a SWAT team? You had started to say that, but is it minutes now, 10 minutes, 5 minutes?
No, yeah, what I was referencing is just strategically, typically SWAT's deployed out to either hostage rescue situation, barricaded, suspect, something to that extent. So when we respond, typically patrol is already there, and they're setting containment, keeping the area safe until SWAT get there. SWAT, at the time, they weren't full-time. So some of them may have been on duty, off duty, vacation. That page goes out, the alert hits them. Typically, they go back to their homes if they're not already geared up. It takes about 30 minutes to 40 minutes to get the entire team there to be effective. And so our change in strategy and approach, having learned from MSD, learned from the airport, was, well, these guys are the tip of the spear. They're our best trained, they're the most competent to engage in these type of lethal gun battles, which will occur. Why wait 30 minutes to send a page out? So we converted that team to a full-time team and strategically have them operating every day of the week. And I'll take maybe one more. I thought I missed someone. I don't want to. Maybe I won't take one more. We're done.
Dr. Carver, can we ask a couple more of you?
Absolutely.
See, if you can take from your perspective, what are the schools doing at this point to make sure that as kids are in school today, what's being done to make the parents feel better that nothing's going to happen, that they're going to come home as they should?
So certainly, one of the things I think is important, a previous question was asking, it was, what are we doing at the schools to actually prevent someone from just simply being able to walk inside the facilities? That is a part of our fortification process, where we have our external doors that are locked. We also ensure that we have a single point of entry going into our schools, so that way we can monitor the activity within activity on our campuses. Related to where are we doing now, this is something that we already have been sending out communications to our security staff to be extra vigilant and be very purposeful and mindful in the actions that they are doing, that they are tasked to be doing on a daily basis. We've also sent out communications with our administrators across the entire district, yet again, to just, these are the things that you want to be mindful of. Please make sure that we are following all of our protocols. We expect that to occur on a daily basis. We're just making sure that we're really intensely focused on it these next few days. For our parents, our guardians, our caregivers, our schools are fine. We do not have an active threat that's happening right now. We do take every threat very seriously. And we are on heightened awareness for obvious reasons, and it is a safe place. We want your children in school. We know that when your children are not in school is when they're not getting the education that they need on a daily basis. They're also not being able to take advantage of potentially some of the resources that are available at our schools. I previously mentioned that if a student or a parent, caregiver, guardian feels as though their child needs some support, we have that available in our schools every day. If it is a community member, you're not a part of the Broward County Public Schools system, please don't forget that through Broward County there is the 211 phone number that you can call, and on that 211 number they will be able to help you and get you resources that you may need. I think it's also very critically important to understand that mental health is not, I don't want this to be defined by someone who has mental health concerns, because for a vast majority of individuals who may have mental health needs are not aggressive. They are not the type of individual that goes out and creates these murders. So please be cognizant of that. We do not want to stigmatize mental health, because then we know the individuals who may have a need may not reach out, which is even worse. And so if you know that something's going on, please work with us. Please help us help you so that we can make sure that we're taking care of our children, our staff, and our entire community.
Dr. Carver, did you get any similar calls from teachers or parents last night or even this morning concerned about returning to work or anything like that?
So I know that many of our administrators across this entire organization have definitely been taking phone calls, text messages, reaching out to their parents and their school communities. Yes, I've also been reached out to as well. Just how are you doing? How are things going? What can we do to help support? Have you thought about, just for those additional suggestions, of which I've received with open ears and have been responsive to as well.
Since it happened here, and we had to make so many changes, are our schools maybe safer than some communities that have never had to deal with this sort of a tragedy?
You know, in Broward County Public Schools, we take a layered approach related to school safety. We know that there is no one way in which to fortify or to say, hey, your school is safe. That is why we have multiple measures that are in place in order to provide for that safe and secure environment for our students as well as for our staff members. I would say in Broward County Public Schools, we've really done a lot of work since the tragedy that happened here. And there's even been a lot of work this past school year in really raising the level of layers that we put into place. Some of them have come with their own controversies. For example, with a randomized wanding approach that we're taking right now. But we also recognize what the research says, and we're implementing the best practices at this point. We still have room to grow in that area, and I'm fully aware of that. And we are very purposeful and mindful and very strategic in that we will always look to become the stellar organization to where others learn from us on how to do school safety at that exemplary level.
Is there a message sent to teachers in terms of how to deal with this morning if children do come in and have heard that about what happened last night?
So our principals are communicating with staff, and we're also making sure, I've also reached out to our mental health counselors and our social workers, school psychologists as well, to make sure that we are prepared for any need that may arise.
This randomized wanding approach, is that happening at several campuses, all campuses? Does the SROs decide when, or security decide when to do that?
No, we actually run it through a computer system, so it truly is a randomized approach, and that we're not doing any type of profiling. And it is right now happening at our secondary schools, middle schools and high schools.
Sheriff, one more.
Sure, Ted.
question. You were talking about as some of the measures that are being taken. 16,000 cameras are being monitored. Talk a bit more about that and how that helps, what it does.
Again, lessons learned. So after Stoneman Douglas, tragedy we had there, the MSD Commission report came out and highlighted some of the deficiencies on our response, and then some of the things that were deficient in terms of the usage of technology. So when we were dealing with our assailant, one of the things that came in to occurrence was the uncertainty as to which floor he was on. Was he on the first floor, second floor, third floor? And so we wanted to invest in technology that would give us the ability to, rather than guess, but pull up live feed of all the camera systems at a school that may be dealing with the threat, so that we can navigate our personnel into that environment to successfully engage and eliminate that threat as fast as we can. Now, the great thing about, since we launched this platform, is we've run about 2,000 different exercises, meaning about 50% of the time we're running training scenarios. The other 1,000 plus has been actual calls for services where a potential threat or an incident occurred close to a school campus. Our threat management unit activated the camera systems to maintain security. And it's not just a matter of an active shooter. I'll give you one scenario that comes to mind. We had a robbery suspect crash his car, bailed out. He's running through the parking lot of one of our schools. Our threat management unit activated all the cameras, was able to capture, witness the suspect running through the parking lot, communicating with the SRO, what side of the school the suspect's on, and then navigating our personnel who's responding from dispatch straight to that environment to be able to successfully, detain and apprehend that individual. So there has been case study after case study over the last really 2 years since we've been moving this needle forward in terms of using technology that, suggests it is the best piece of recommended equipment or technology that we've put in place in Stoneman Douglas. All right. Thank you folks so much.